Hello, everybody. Welcome to Live with Marketers. Live with Marketers is LinkedIn's talk show for marketers by marketers, where we're tackling the topics that are most important to B2B marketers, the top challenges they're facing today, really everything that's top of mind with the brightest minds in the B2B arena. So very excited to be broadcasting to you today. I'm still here in my homegrown studio in Los Angeles, hopefully to be back in a live studio. And my name is Alex Rin. I'm a senior content marketing manager here at LinkedIn. Very excited to have you and very excited to have our guests as well. So thank you all so much for tuning in for this specific episode. We're here to talk about the changing landscape in consumer privacy and specifically how it affects B2B marketing. Now, it's no secret that consumers are increasingly concerned about how much data they're handing over to brands, not to mention what the brands might be doing with it. They're demanding more privacy and protection, and they're getting it. Whether it's new legislation or third-party cookie deprecation, the compass is clearly moving toward more company constraints for marketers. The twist is that consumers are still demanding personalized experiences from marketers, because of course we know if it's not relevant, it's just noise. So we all have to use data customer to deliver these experiences to our buyers while not using data to encroach upon their privacy rights. So super simple, right? Thankfully, we have a great team here today to talk about this issue, the challenges, the opportunities, how marketers can prepare. And we've actually got some fascinating original research that will give us some insight and guidance. So our guests this time around are Peter Dewey with Boston Consulting Group and Shelley Kramer with Futurum Research. I'd love for both of you to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about what you do, and share something, as is tradition, that is not on your LinkedIn profile. So Shelley, let's start with you.
Well, hello, and it's so great to be here. Let's see. I built a 20 plus year career as a marketing brand strategist, but these days I mostly work as a tech analyst and researcher. And everything that I do, everything that my team and I do here at Futurum is about change, transformation, innovation, disruption. So I'm kind of well versed in that. And I like to say, what's not on my LinkedIn profile is that I'm the mother of 4 daughters, ranging in age from 16-year-old twins to my oldest daughter who turned 40 this last year. So I have a crazy procreation story. I've certainly done my share. But as the mother of 4 daughters, I like to say that raising 4 daughters has provided me with ample experience to function incredibly well in a high state of chaos. In addition to that, I'm also a crazy rabid landscape gardener and equally crazy when it comes to creating in the kitchen. So my passions balance out, my creative passions tend to balance out my tech geek nerdiness. So there you go.
Love it. A woman of many talents and many years of data gathering with all of those daughters.
Absolutely.
All right, Peter, over to you.
All right, great. Thanks, Alex. And thanks everyone for joining today. Peter Dewey here. I'm with the Boston Consulting Group. I lead up BCG's B2B marketing topic that cuts across a whole plethora of industries, everything from financial services to tech to telco, to healthcare, industrial goods, and back again. So we work across a ton of different industry verticals and a lot of different clients. But really, the common denominator is how do we accelerate growth from marketing and sales integrations with products. And incredibly excited to join you today. As Alex was mentioning, we conducted some recent research in partnership with LinkedIn to look at how the B2B privacy landscape in particular is changing. So excited to dive into that today. We'll be sharing out a link to the recent research that was published as of this morning, so hot off the presses. And one thing that I guess personally outside of my LinkedIn profile, I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and if all goes to plan this summer, we will spend more days camping in national parks than we will in our home in Seattle. So we're avid campers, avid to get into the outdoors. By will or by force, our children will love it. So far, they have loved all the adventures so far, particularly beach camping. So we will bring our culinary prowess to the beach and the national parks around the U.S. But excited to get to do that this summer.
That's impressive. That was going to be my next follow-up question. Do the kids like it, or have you conditioned them to believe that they like it? Because I never liked camping growing up, personally.
Me neither.
The power of a colorful sleeping bag is very influential to a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And pillows, and you've got to make them, get excited about it with the nicks and the knacks. And it has been knock on wood, not been pulling teeth so far.
Cool. Well, good luck to you on that. Okay, so thanks again, both of you, for being here and for taking the time. We really appreciate it. And Peter, and thanks in advance for bringing the takeaways from the hot off the presses research that we published this morning. But before we dive in, I want to kick it to the audience over to a poll question to see how everyone is feeling. I know that this topic can kind of bring about some feelings of anxiety. So the question I have for the audience is, do you feel you have clarity on the landscape of new technologies emerging to mitigate data privacy collection and activation issues? That's a long question, but you get the gist. A, yes. B, sort of. Or C, not at all. And any answer is completely okay. We're here to talk about it all. We just want to kind of get a litmus test to see where everyone's at and how everyone's feeling. We'll give you a couple seconds to respond to that. In the meantime, do we have any predictions of what we might think, Peter or Shelley?
Well, we asked a very similar question. The research was just published, and the answer is about 40%. So we'll see. 40% felt that they, are actively addressing these topics. About 60% felt that they were still a little bit in the nebulous zone of not quite sure what to do with it yet. So we'll see how it compares.
I haven't seen the research, but that would be my guess, that more people are, concerned, trying to figure it out, know it's a challenge that they have to get their arms around, but that they're far from feeling like they're there yet.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, they're still changing. It's an ever-changing landscape. So I think it'd be possible to feel like 100% confident, but let's see where we're at. We have most people, around 90%, saying sort of, and the rest saying yes, exclamation mark. No one has responded not at all. So we have a lot of confident people in this group, and I'm excited. I hope that we can bring even more to the table in terms of knowledge for them to consume. So let's jump right in. There are so many varying levels of response to this data and privacy issue. We've got the people saying that the sky is falling, a little bit dramatic, folks who don't think much will change, and pretty much everything in between. So I'd love, Peter, if you could kick it off. I know we mentioned the research that went out, and we'll get into that. But I figured you could kind of set the scene with sharing a little bit about the methodology of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the research that was conducted is we polled 100 different marketers with a survey, and talked to about 30 or 40 others just in one-on-one conversations with CMOs and executives and across a whole plethora of industries. And I think that what we were trying to understand is, depending on the industry, your background, who you're coming from, how are you viewing the world? How are you preparing for this change? And what are you actually seeing? I think if I were to sum up sort of 3 salient points that really came out or really popped to me, was that one is that most marketers today are already seeing an impact. It's not that this is something that is going to happen in the future, but they're already feeling, data degradation, performance degradation, and they're starting to just see the impact of it. In general, people are seeing about a 20 to 30% reduction in the performance as a result of the changes that have already happened, not accounting for what could happen in the future. I think the second thing that was particularly of interest to me was that most marketers, I think in an encouraging sense, don't think about this necessarily as a challenge. Yes, there is a challenge aspect to this, and you have to figure this out. But most are actually viewing it as an opportunity. And how do you think about re-engineering your data, your outbound conversations? How do you get back to the basics of telling amazing stories and really connecting with your customers in really emotional ways, and in ways that are truly in line with what they need and what they want in the present moment in time, in the pandemic and everything that's happening with that. And I think the third thing is that it really takes a team, more so than ever, is a cross-functional approach to solving this problem occurring. So it's not just the CMO organization, but it's the product organizations, the sales organizations, the financial organizations, the tech organizations, and even the legal organizations. I found there was a fascinating quote of how often now the legal team and the lawyers are in the room of marketing planning sessions, much more so than they were today. And so as I think about the research and the implications from it, is it takes a team, think about the opportunity, and don't feel that you're alone. I think everyone is feeling the pain and the squeeze on it right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's a good point around, there's different ways to view this in general. There are the challenges, there are opportunities, there are valid, actually, sides to both of the story, but the point is that there are actually both sides to the story. So let's talk about, let's get the bad news out of the way first. Let's talk about the challenges. Shelly, do you want to kick us off with some of the challenges that you think are upcoming?
Well, I think that I was thinking a little bit about, some of the things that you said, Peter. I think that, one thing I think that we can't overlook is that even in relatively large organizations, our experience has been that marketing teams are relatively small. And I think that that is a challenge. And I think that figuring out marketing teams are small, and marketing is more complex than ever before. And then when you add this change into the equation, I think that adds to the complexity. And so I think that, figuring out, we have a talent gap. We have a skills gap. Figuring out how to add skilled marketers to your team, and figuring out maybe how you can work to reskill your existing marketing teams, thinking about adding vendor partners to your teams. And I don't think that, again, I'm thinking about some of our biggest clients who, we might be working with a particular marketing team, and of course there are multiple marketing teams depending on the size of your organization. But, I'm thinking about a conversation I had with a client recently where her marketing team, and she has, millions in marketing budget, but her marketing team consists of her and two other people, and and they have a lot of expertise between them. But this kind of expertise is specialized. And then knowing how we can shift and how we can change, our reliance that we've had on third-party cookies and that sort of thing. How can we ramp up our email efforts and some of our other things? And I think that that's really important. And I don't think necessarily that means you have to hire 10 people in your marketing department. I don't think that's realistic. But I think that looking at vendor partners that you can add, consulting partners that you can add, tech solutions that exist that may help augment these gaps. I think that's a real challenge that organizations have, and they're going to have to perhaps realize that they can't continuing on with the status quo in really changing how we market probably isn't the answer. It's making some changes in our marketing organization. I think that's really important. And I think about, Peter, you made the comment about legal being at the table when it comes to marketing planning, which is, and by the way, I spent 10 years as a paralegal in my early career. So I have a great love for the legal part of any organization. And I'm actually the person within my organization who's always saying, but wait, what are the ramifications here? So I understand that. But then I also think about, as marketers, we have, in many instances, an imperative to, speed is important, right? When you add legal teams to the equation, anybody who's ever been a part of those conversations knows that slows things down significantly. So I think navigating that challenge and figuring out a happy medium there is going to be interesting for teams as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in some ways, as it's becoming more complex, I think it's forcing us to go back to the basics of advertising, right? Like telling a story, building a relationship. Those are all things that marketers had to do before we even had the digital
absolutely.
to even deal with. Forgot to mention, we will leave 10 minutes at the end approximately for questions. So submit your questions throughout. We'll get to as many as we can at the end. We'll also have a survey at the end, but I'll remind you about that. But just heads up about the questions at the end so that you can make sure you get your voice heard. All right, Peter, what are the main challenges you think that B2B marketers are concerned about at the moment?
Well, I would echo completely what Shelley said, and I cannot agree more with the talent conversation. I think that there's, a widely known phenomenon of hiring challenges, retention challenges, the great resignation that's happening today. But I think what I want to really emphasize what Shelley said, it's yes, there is all of that stuff, but fundamentally there's a new skill set that is really required to do this correct. I mean, when you it's very easy to talk about the cookieless world and cookies, et cetera, and all that fun stuff. Cookies are really technical, and how all of this stuff actually comes together is there's some real technical engineering components to it. And I think the concept of gaining leverage and upskilling talent is critical, both on your own existing teams and also through the partnerships. I could not agree more with what Shelley said on that component. I think the other element that is challenging right now is that in the climate of the pandemic of the world today, there's some industries that are facing massive supply problems. Other industries are facing growth problems. There's no one size fits all answer to this. And I think that how this is going to come to life is going to be different for different marketers. Some need to be pushing a growth agenda much more aggressively. And what does growth mean in a privacy centric world, or a world where you might have slightly less precision on the data and that you have from a privacy perspective? In a supply constrained world, when you might not be trying to push demand or growth in the short term, how do you think about brand building? How do you think about getting back and connecting to the core story of what you're trying to tell, the purpose of what you're trying to get to? And I think navigating those uncertainties in the context that you exist in is going to be a massive challenge overall for everybody.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about, obviously loss of data signal is something that's of concern. We talked about changing internal processes, talent gaps, legal, yikes, now involved in marketing planning, which in many ways that's not too much of a change from my world coming from a big organization. What about the measurement challenges and the fears about loss of targeting capabilities and lots of like performance marketing data?
Well, I think I'll hop in here. And I think some of that, Alex, goes back to, you've said this a couple of times, but I think that it's important to understand getting back to the basics is where a lot of us need to go. And I think, not taking things for granted. For instance, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with clients. And one of the questions that I'll ask is, what does your email database look like? Oh, yeah, that's kind of in rough shape. Well, what kind of email marketing do you do? What kind of email marketing do you do post-sale? What kind of email marketing do you do, pre-sale? How do you measure that? How do you, continually add people to your email database? How often are you touching them? What are you talking with them about? What are you doing on LinkedIn? What are you doing on other social channels? How are you opening up? We talk about telling better stories and everything else. But I will say that I've said this so many times, I think people get tired of hearing me say it internally anyway, but, writing great content and telling great stories is only a very small part of the equation. Getting anyone to hear those, to see those, to read those, that's where the magic happens, right? And so you can do all the storytelling you want, but if you don't have a community and a way to get those stories in front of your customers and prospects, they're not going to do you any good. So I think that getting back to those basics and things that aren't new to any of us is really important.
Yeah, and you're right. If you might have a great story that you're trying to tell, but if you don't have a community, if you don't have the proper distribution channels set up, like a multi-channel strategy going, and if you can't get people to feel something, which is like what everyone's getting back to, especially in a post-pandemic world where everyone's feeling a little bit more emotional, I think that will be a big part of it as well. Peter?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is on from a measurement tools perspective, one of the things that really came quite to quote one of the CMOs that we talked with, attribution is dead. Like, I mean, there's been this hope that attribution, multi-touch attribution will be the way of the future, and with the headwinds of privacy and data implications, there's at best it's challenged, if not completely irrelevant in some way, shape, or form going forward. And so many marketers are actually changing the way that they think about it. And in some ways, what is old is new again. I think there has been a healthy stream of momentum to get back to what I'd call modernized marketing mix models or econometric models, to really bring a more sophisticated analytic solution to the table. So it's not just doing exactly what was done previously, but doing it in a more advanced way is a key thing. There's been a massive acceleration of a lot of experimentation as well in terms of A/B tests and match market tests and the like, to help bring more confidence into the marketing arena from a measurement and ROI perspective. So we definitely see that has been that was a key feature of the research that was done, and we've seen that with a lot of the clients that we work with. And to get that right, to echo a point I was saying earlier, is it really does require having a cross-functional conversation. This can't just be a conversation with the marketing team, but you have to integrate sales teams, product teams, finance teams to really get measurement correct and understanding what is the driver between sales versus marketing. In a B2B context, that divide is constant. They're constantly pointing fingers at each other like, oh no, we're not growing because of you or whatever. But really to overcome that requires a cross-functional solution and actually coming together as a cohesive unit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just smiling because the struggle between marketing and sales and the pointing of fingers is like, it's so real. I don't know if it'll ever end.
It's never going away. It's never not existed. It's never going away.
That's right.
Okay, so let's take a trip down to Positive Town, where we can talk about some of the opportunities. And within the topic of the opportunities, I actually brought some of my friends onto the episode just via video to share what they think the opportunities lie and why marketers should be optimistic about the future. So to kick off the conversation, we're going to roll in a few thoughts from Mandy McEwen, founder and CEO of Mod Girl Marketing.
Consumers are becoming more aware and more uncomfortable about the collection of their data. As such, companies are now taking measures to protect consumers' data. So what does that mean for marketers? In my opinion, I think that the privacy laws are actually a benefit for marketers because it places an emphasis on value and quality content. And I'm not just talking about gated content, but ungated content. So when you come from a buyer-centric mentality and you're giving value at all times, it doesn't matter what the privacy laws are.
Yeah, so it got cut off a little bit at the end there, but she's saying it doesn't matter what the privacy laws are as long as you have a buyer-centric approach to your marketing. What do you guys think about that?
I think it makes sense.
Cool. All right, I have another one, and then we can discuss more just between us three. But I have a quick thought from Tamara McCleary, CEO of Thulium.
Hi, I'm Tamara McCleary. I'm the CEO of Thulium. And as far as privacy issues in marketing, I think that the privacy changes are good for marketing. I think it forces us to do what it is that we say we know is profitable, and that is personalization, because we have to know who our customer is or who that target market is that we're marketing to. And personalization is important because it does force us to know our customer. And marketing is all about relationships. Privacy is about respecting those relationships.
Interesting points. Yeah, because we talked about personalization a little bit before, and I was kind of introducing it as though personalization is difficult to implement as a strategy without all of the data. However, her point is that, well, if you really know your customers, which you should because you're in the business of relationships, then it shouldn't be that big of an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it also means that, we as marketers have to stop trying to hit the easy button, and I'll use LinkedIn as an example. I'm a huge fan of the platform that is LinkedIn. I use it all the time, and I get connection requests all the time from people who have not bothered to look at my profile, who have, they're sending me a connection request, may or may not be thinly veiled. I know the minute I hit accept, they're going to pitch me with something that may or may, in most instances, is completely not relevant to what it is I do, what it is I might need. Because they're hitting the easy button. And that's just one example of, but I think that understanding that buyers buy because of trust and because of relationships, and working just a little bit harder, whether you're using LinkedIn or your email or any other platform, I think it's just work harder. There used to be a time before the internet where to meet people, you actually had to go out and suck it up and go in person.
What?
To networking events. And this was even like pre, not just a pandemic thing, but you had to it was the worst, but you had to go and you had to shake hands and you had to hand out business cards and you had to have conversations with people. And then the internet really, sort of changed that, and social platforms changed that. And now everybody just wants an easy button. And that's not really how it works. That's not how people buy.
Yeah, well, that is how people date apparently now.
I know it is. Glad I'm not out there.
Seriously.
I love that concept of the easy button. And I think that I've often used the phrase that one of the things that I have, candidly thinking of the industry overall in the past 5 to 10 years is that the cookie has become a crutch for many.
Yeah.
And I think that most think that I can go into, literally the media platforms today, click a button and just going to magically make my business grow. And I think that that's a bit of a false sense of security. And I think that what these shifts have changed is allow marketers to rethink what that means. And I think what's very interesting to me is that when you think about business cycles holistically, there aren't necessarily a lot of industry changing industry events that cause like absolute changes in the to how people think. Privacy shifts are one of those events, and people are actually for the first time in a while stopping and saying, wait, how do we rethink this? How do we re-engineer the way that we do this? And what we, are absolute advocates of first movers to really understand, like, this is happening, like whether we like it or not, it's happening. If you can be a first mover and understand how to make it work for you, for your customers, the stories you need to tell for your sales teams, you will gain a competitive advantage. Like there's the time is now to act. It's not to wait. If you wait, you're going to be behind.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so just to summarize before we move on a little bit, some of the opportunities, an opportunity to get back to basics, to work a little bit harder to get to know your customer, rethinking your strategy, transparency. We know that people buy from people buy from people, but people make up companies, and people buy from companies that they trust and companies that are transparent with them, and companies that walk the walk and talk the talk and walk the walk, etc. So let's talk about the specific changes. I don't even know if I'm completely up to date on all of the changes that are coming down. So I'd love to hear from the experts, you two, what are the incoming changes that are set to impact the elements of B2B marketing? And Peter, we'll kick it off with you.
Yeah, and it's funny, Alex. I often feel like it is every week or every month that's like one more layer of mud is scraped off of the crystal ball. But I don't know that it's still clear. I mean, when you look at, and I say that in the sense of the changes that we can talk about now are going to be different in a month, different in a year. And I think what marketers need to do are think about what are the immutable things, the things that won't change. I mean, how do you build out capabilities and structures and processes in place and technologies that will last the change of whatever happens to come? I mean, I think the big noise right now is, more recently has been the shifts in iOS and what is actually going to change with the IDFA tags. And, there's, that's probably almost certainly moving over to the Android systems as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so mobile devices and cross-app conversations and the privacy of what can and can't be done, that is a huge component of what is on people's mind today and what are the impacts of that. And when you think about, most classic measurement solutions of last touch attribution, you're going to get squeezed on the ability to even track that from an acquisition standpoint or a lead generation standpoint and things like that. So the iOS shifts are massive. The underlying legislation in CCPA and GDPR in Europe are incredibly important in what can and can't be done in those constructs. There's the deprecation of cookies that is or isn't happening or might we'll see how that evolves. There's a slew of potential alternative solutions that are out there, where universal IDs and things like that are coming to bear. I think the problem, and the research really spoke to this, is that marketers are a bit apprehensive about who to even trust at this point, because every single vendor is saying, we have a solution, this isn't a problem, we've got this taken care of, don't worry about it. And I think that there's a lot of noise in the market that is making it challenging for marketers. And I think to cut through that, really, again, I like the phrase that we've kind of landed on here in this conversation, but get back to the basics. Like, what matters? Like, how do you know who your customers are at a core level? Where are they? How can you have meaningful conversations with them? And do that in a privacy friendly way? Because I don't think that the legislation, the technology, it's going to change, and that's the only certainty is uncertainty, I think, in this space.
Yeah, the only certain thing you can do is be certain within your own product and your own story and the stories that you're telling. Because yeah, you're right. Everything external, everything outside of that is going to be constantly in flux. So yeah, Shelley.
Yeah, and I think that what the clients that we work with are all involved in some aspect or another in digital transformation journeys, right? And the thing about digital transformation journeys, the hard reality of that is that they are never done. And we are living in a time where tech is transformative in innumerable ways. Tech is, speeding up the change. The speed of change is more rapid than ever before. And oh, by the way, that is not going to slow down. And so it is, so those of us who are wired for change, who are excited about disruption, who are excited about solving challenges and problems, we are best suited to survive and really thrive in times like this. And I think the same is true for marketers. And this is our own digital transformation journey. And as Peter said, this is not going to change. We're going to just get our arms around how we might do things differently in a cookieless world, and then something else is going to change. And so I think really getting back to those basics, again, we beat that drum quite a lot in this conversation, but getting back to those basics and understanding that, it is not as difficult as we might think. And it is, again, keeping our customer data up to date, understanding the role that CDP plays in your business operation and your CRM plays in your business operations. And there are new platforms that are rolling out that are called consent management platforms that can slide in and into how you're using your CDP. And some CDPs offer this or are beginning to offer this. So it's thinking about how we can track and manage this, how we are communicating with our customers, how we're identifying our customers, how we're building personal relationships with them. Our sales team, of course, this is incredibly important to them, but it should likewise be important to our marketing teams as well. So I think there are some great opportunities here for us to shift a little bit, but also understand. And again, this is a set of changes that, is coming down the pike, but it certainly isn't the last bit of change that we're going to be wrestling with. And so getting that in your mind and understanding that, and actually in a weird way, finding a way to be excited about that and think, this is a challenge, but it's kind of like Dora the Explorer, right? You can do this. Yes, we can. And I think that getting that mindset firmly entrenched is part of the key to success. We can do this.
Yeah, as is most of the key to success in life, having a positive attitude and a little bit of reframing, which I've done a lot of in therapy. So I'm all for it. But yeah, you're right. It's survival of the fittest. And things like retargeting that we think are helping us in many ways and maybe are. I don't know if those tactics have ever really worked on me, to be honest. It's like that level of like, when are you being annoying versus when are you being helpful, or when are you being creepy versus helpful? So it's almost like we're going to take a step back and, not retargeting won't be as effective or it'll be limited. But in a way, it's like that never really worked on me anyway. So what do we think about, will some companies be more effective than others? Is this like an even playing field?
Of course, some companies will be more effective than others. I mean, that's how it always is, right? Peter, I know you have some thoughts on that. Go right ahead.
No, I absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the things that when we actually conducted the research, we didn't necessarily intentionally structure it this way, but one of the main outcomes was that we actually can classify the companies into the data rich, the data poor, and the data regulated. And I think unquestionably, yes. I mean, if you have more access to transactional data, if you have there's some industries that just generally have more digital traffic and more signal that they can actually get and work with. Others don't. They're disconnected. It's a B2B2C motion. It's a B2B2B motion. It's a much longer purchase cycle. And so you have, 10 sales stages that come after the lead generation and the MQL and the SQL. And so, I think, and then you have the regulated industries that, the financial services and healthcare that we're already dealing with more elevated data privacy laws to begin with. It's going to impact different companies in different ways, and just the supply chain, components versus the growth components that I was mentioning earlier. And so I think what is really important is that you need to chart your own course. I think that things like benchmarks and looking at what everyone else is doing can only get you so far. It is not a bad place to start, but really what's going to drive is those big transformations that Jelly was referencing.
Yeah, agree. So let's move on, if that's okay. I want to talk about some of the specifics of the key strategies and best practices that marketers can put into action, and put into action now to set them up for success in the future. We've talked about back to basics, maybe just a little bit more on what that means. If you have any other ideas of alternate tactics that marketers should be investing their time in, and Shelley, we can start with you.
Well, I think one very smart thing to do is read research like Peter and his team have developed. That said, and that is incredibly important, do your homework. But secondly, invest in your own research. Don't assume you know what your customers think and want, and don't assume that your customers are exactly the same as the customers that Peter and team profiled in their research. Do your own research. Ask them what you think about, I was thinking about during the course of this conversation, how we've seen the shift to not only these days do people want to collect your email address, they want to collect your phone number so that they can send you text messages. I can promise you, if you send me a text message that's related to that's a cold text message, I don't know you, I can promise you I will put you on the I will never buy from you list, right? Maybe your customers don't feel that way. Maybe you're like, for instance, my 16-year-old daughters opt in, give away their phone numbers all the time. I don't want that. So ask your customers what they want. Do things beyond that. I think what you need to do is you need to nurture first-party data sources and double down on your first-party relationships. And that's email, that's social, that's communities, that's events that you might host. Give people a reason to want to engage with and to stay connected to you, and serve them up things that interest them. I think the other thing that you can do is you can create partnerships with other companies and platforms to help establish second-party data partnerships. You can do things, develop partnerships in and with walled garden communities. And these, I think we're finding, are going to be even more important now. Think about, what it is you do. Can you create a private community just for users of your software or any other kind of product that you have? And, that's a place where people with like interests, with like challenges, with like concerns can mingle with each other, learn from each other, that sort of thing. Well, that's an amazing source of first party data, and your customers benefit tremendously from that. I already touched on, rethinking your tech investments. Use the right platforms. Don't be seduced by the first sales pitch you hear from somebody trying to sell you a solution that is the be all end all solution to the cookieless future. Do your homework. Talk to customers using platforms like this. Find the good, the bad, and the ugly about things like that. But I do think that you need to use the right platforms. And I think we see companies out there, Salesforce, Treasure Data, Adobe, and others, who are developing solutions that, or have solutions that make sense. And I think that, I already mentioned this, the importance of looking at or think about maybe adding a consent management platform to your tech stack. I think that we only have a few of those kind of solutions out there today. I think that we're going to have many more of them in the future, or CRMs, CDPs who are adding that functionality into their existing platform. So I think those are all things that you can do and be thinking about.
Yeah, building on a couple of those points, I would say things you can do right now: invest in people. You have to invest in people.
Yeah.
There is a talent shortage in this industry. Everybody is trying to go after the same talent. You all know that and feel that in your day-to-day lives. Invest in people. Those people can be, I think, to Shelly's point, doesn't necessarily just have to be internal. You can also think about partnerships as the extended part of your team as well. So invest in people. I think invest in data and analytics. There's going to be AI at scale, and trying to understand what data can do for you to drive a competitive advantage is absolutely critical to get it right. And I'm going to use a phrase, intelligently invest in technology. And what I mean by that is think about ways to prove the value from your technology investments as you go. One of the common pitfalls that we often see is, I can't tell you how many CIOs or CDOs or CTOs or CFOs have said, we have been going through this MarTech transformation for 3 years. It has cost tens of millions of dollars, and I don't know what value it's derived for us yet. You have to prove the value as you go. Don't think that there's going to be an end. Shelly, what you said, I could not agree with more of it. This doesn't stop. Like, there's not an end to a MarTech transformation. Right. It is a continuous journey, and make sure that you're proving value as you go to bring stakeholders in the organization along.
Yeah, and I think I will add one thing to that. Your comment about investing in people is so salient, but also when you're evaluating a technology solution, be more careful than ever before. And I too have heard the same horror stories. I'll give you an example. I know somebody, and this is from a few years ago, but somebody spent, $80,000 to bring Marketo in. And, they had sales presentations from lots of different vendors. And by the way, this is nothing against Marketo, but the problem was they spent $80,000 on a technology solution. They got it in-house. And you know what? They had nobody on their team that knew how to use it. Nobody on their team that really knew what to do. So a year after spending $80,000 on this, add to their tech stack, it was sitting there unused. So that's really where the magic of people and technology, and also I think what we're seeing from technology vendors, we're starting to see them begin to understand that service is a really, really important part of the equation there. So how, if you're evaluating a technology solution, one, you have to ask the question of what do I need internally to be able to support? What kind of expertise do we need? Because the last thing I want to do is spend $80 or $100 or $200,000 on a technology solution that we're not going to be able to use. Because if I'm the person that makes the decision to bring that in, then it's my butt that's on the line, and nobody wants that. So I think it's really, and also having the conversation with any vendor that you're talking with is, how are you going to support me in this journey? What kind of ongoing learning and training is available to me and my team? What kind of expertise do we need internally? Who do we need to hire? That sort of thing. So I think that that's really, really an important part of this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you both for your thoughts there. A lot to digest and think about, but the too long didn't read version is change is coming, change is here, and it's not going to stop. So okay, I want to transition quickly to a segment that we call Trend or Dead End. Very classy motion graphic. So we're going to discuss a topic. It's pretty much self-explanatory. Is it a trend? Is it a dead end? What are the pros and cons? You guys are the experts, so I'm looking to get your thoughts. And the topic is privacy centers. So do we need separate privacy centers within organizations? Some organizations are almost creating privacy centers within their organizations, similar to like having a digital center of excellence. So is this necessary? Is this a good idea? Thoughts?
I'll go first and say I think it's a good idea in theory. The skeptic in me says I'm just not sure. I'm not sure, based on some of my work within organizations that are undergoing some of these kinds of transformations, I'm not sure I see it as realistic. I think it's a great selling point. I think to say that we have a privacy center of excellence is awesome. It's great marketing messaging. What does that privacy center of excellence look like? Is it one person? Is it a team of 20 from throughout the organization, including sales and legal and HR? And you know what I'm saying? So I think it could be a good idea. My concern with it is that I see that, a lot of times the question that we ask within an organization is, show me the money. Where's the money? How does this make me money? Right. And so the skeptic in me says that allocating budget numbers to this kind of initiative, and then the subsequent questions on how is this delivering value to my bottom line? How do I continue to fund and staff this? I'm not sure those two balance out. I would love if that were not the case, but I approach that somewhat skeptical. Peter, what do you say?
So if I take my marketing hat off for a second, I would say that there is a broader trend of risk mitigation and chief risk officers that would be an umbrella that covers more than just marketing, to be candid. So I think it's because I agree with a lot of this, the skepticism, Charlie, that you'd say, but I do think that there is a hyper awareness of, it's not just privacy, and it gets bigger than just the news cycles, how fast things can go viral in today's world, and just making sure that, whether it's social movements or anything else, that companies are staying ahead of that from a communications and PR perspective and a risk standpoint, I think are, that I would say is a trend in a more general sense. The privacy specific thing is maybe a subcomponent of that, but there's, some challenges to that as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for indulging me in my trend or dead end segment. All right, so we're running out of time. I want to make sure that we have ample time for questions. So let's wrap up with some final thoughts. So Peter and Shelley, what are your key takeaways for B2B marketers in the coming year? Peter, let's kick it off with you.
I think the number one takeaway is this is a great opportunity for marketers to rethink about capabilities and customer value propositions to really drive your business. And I think fundamentally the time is now. This is something that's going to evolve. It's evolving today. It's going to be evolving tomorrow. Building out a capability and a muscle to adapt with it as it goes, and building that competitive advantage for you is here and now. I mean, the returns that you can get from this, the value at stake is tremendous. So work now, think about the transformation, think about the value equation, and think about this as an opportunity, a real opportunity to step change where you are today.
Good. Shelley?
Well said. I completely agree. I think that, to build on what you said, Peter, there's an opportunity to make privacy part of your value proposition with customers. And you can build a story around consumer privacy and data privacy and trust, and that this is our passion. And Apple is but one brand doing this, right? But there will be more, and there are more. And so I think that thinking about how we can use this as part of our messaging and truly let customers know how passionate we are about their privacy, I think is really important. And I think that, probably the biggest takeaway that I hope you walk away with is that the solution here is not just one thing, and I think our conversation has shown that it's a variety of alternatives and tactics that all work together. And I think it's also about creating a marketing culture and a corporate culture as a whole that are based on a foundation of continuous learning and innovation and experimentation and changed, and and all of these things underpinned by a true commitment to consumer data privacy. And I think that knowing going in that this is a journey. You don't start and you're not done, and you'll keep learning, and there'll be new challenges and new solutions along the way. And, you just kind of have to take a deep breath and say, okay, team, here we go. We got this. And so I think approaching it with that mindset will serve you well.
Wonderful. Perfect wrap. Thank you so much. Let's roll into Q&A. Before we do, we are about to set a survey live. So if you wouldn't mind, it's just a quick, I think 3-question or so survey, just asking you what you thought of the broadcast, and are we addressing topics that are important to you, and how can we improve in the future? So go ahead and take a look at the survey while we roll into questions. Okay, the first question is, it's a comment, I guess, a demand perhaps. I'd like to hear the opinions of the panel on contextual advertising to address the ongoing deprecation of third-party cookies.
It's really important. It really is. And getting to a place where you can pull that contextual data from your analytics is really going to be critical moving forward.
Yeah, and I'd say that one of the most common questions that we get today is what I'd say is the role of advocacy. And I put that largely in the bucket of how do you use digital platforms in contextual settings to get in front of the right influencers, the right advocates, and the right. It doesn't have to necessarily be mega superstars. It can be forums and blogs and things that are influential in the space that you're in. It's one of the number one questions we get. So absolutely, it's a huge part of the underlying strategy here.
Okay, great. The next one is, can the speaker state their top 3 go-tos for the B2B digital marketer in a privacy-first era? So 3 go-tos, resources, where do you read up on this stuff? What blogs do you visit? Who do you listen to, etc.?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I one thing I didn't say that's not in my LinkedIn profile is that I am a voracious consumer of information from so many sources, and my whole team is, yeah. Anyway, I don't have just one. I think that, I will say, and again, I have professed to being a fan of the LinkedIn platform, which is so true. I think you can find great information on the LinkedIn platform. I think you can find great information. I mean, you can find great information, Googling. You can read Peter's research. I think that there are so many places and people are covering this exhaustively. But what you do want to back away from, I think you'll find great information from vendors out there who, of course, want to sell you a solution. I think that when you can look at research from a group like Peter's in partnership with LinkedIn, I think that that's the kind of research that is brand agnostic, that's solution agnostic, that's going to help you. So I think that that's really kind of how you might want to vet the sources that you look at. But I don't have any specific sources to cite beyond that. Peter, what about you?
Well, it's interesting. I have a similar approach. I think that the landscape is changing so much that I truly value a 360 view of what everyone's talking about and seeing. And so I I think there's white papers galore on the topic, and I try to consume all of them, to be honest. I don't think that there's one authoritative source on it, because I think everyone is learning together as the system evolves. The second thing I would actually say is, I am an absolute advocate of go do things and test in the market. I think that the concept of what you hear in sessions versus in technical communications and technical talks versus what you're actually seeing in the market when you put marketing in the market, and a response from customers, a response from sales teams, test, and build a view for yourself. I think Shelley referenced it in the form of do your own research. To me, like, the best research you can do is what is working in the market and what is not working. What is fact from fiction? What is the unicorn versus the reality? And I think I can't advocate enough. I think with the vast majority of our clients, we are advocating to genuinely put 2 to 3 tests in the market every single week, to constantly be learning and what's happening and what's real.
Awesome.
Well, and I think that that's kind of what best-in-class marketers have understood and have been doing for a really long time. And it's, you have a theory, you launch a test, you look at your data, you tweak what you were doing based on what the data tells you, then you relaunch it again, then you look at the data, then you tweak. I mean, that should be your practice day in and day out, for everything that you do. The data will tell you what's working and what's not.
Absolutely. That's funny. I thought I could see Peter just being like, well, I just listen to myself. Like, I work for Boston Consulting Group. Like,
I read my own research.
Just listen to my team.
Even researchers are geeks. We like to read all the research, right, Peter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Love it. That's great. Okay. Any thoughts on other alternatives to test other than text message or email? For example, the future of audio podcasts aren't as regulated.
There's no silver bullet here. I think that in many instances, things like podcasts are gaining traction, but they're also candidly very hard to measure.
They are.
I think the concept of connected TV and where a lot of that is going, and it's a device. It's different implications from a privacy standpoint. I think one of the advocacy component that I mentioned earlier, it's great. Influencers are great. Again, it's tough to measure. And I think that one of the underlying trends that we're seeing right now is what I'd call a refragmentation of media, as people start to think about what is the next source, where is it going to be, and building out those muscles to work into it, I think is important. So I think the answer is yes to all of the above. Consider how you think about testing it. We often advocate for a 70-20-10 model, meaning 70% of your budget is going towards proven tactics, 20% is going towards optimization of those tactics, and 10% is constantly looking for the next thing. Does it have to be 70-20-10? No, not explicitly or exactly, but the concept is you should always be looking for the thing that's next to drive you a competitive advantage. If you're just following what everyone else is doing, you're not going to gain that advantage. You need to try to stay one step ahead. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's interesting what we were saying earlier, that like attribution is dead, I think is what you had said earlier. We were talking about, and it's almost as though, yes, activities that are typically more top of the funnel are more difficult to measure, but it's almost as though we need to rethink the value of the upper funnel as things get a little bit more dicey with bottom of the funnel metrics and tactics.
Right, absolutely.
Shelley, do you have anything else to add to that other than what Peter said, or should we move on to the next question?
No, I think we're good to move on.
Okay, all right, great. Let's see here. Oh, okay, this is a good one. So we talked a lot about back to basics. I'm gonna hashtag back to basics.
Back to basics.
We talked a lot about that. One of the people who tuned in is basically asking, we talked about that, and we talked about providing value and quality content. What makes up high quality content in your opinion?
Well, I think that non-marketing related content is very hard for marketers to do. And by that, I mean that if I happen to see a link that you've shared, whether it's in an email, whether it's on social, however it is that it gets to me, if I take the time to click on that link and see what you have to say about something, the last thing I want is a sales pitch about your company. And I know that for marketers, this is incredibly hard, but the reality of it is I'm there. I know that you're selling, I know what you do. I know what you sell. I've done probably that homework. And like I said, if I subscribe to your email and I know who you are, right? I've given you permission to connect with me, to touch me on a regular basis. And I won't even now, I have dirty thoughts in my head. But anyway, my point here is that make it relevant to me. What people care about hearing and learning about are what's happening in the industry. What are the challenges that companies like mine are facing? What are they doing to surmount those challenges? What are some great ideas that I might not have heard of before? What are some solutions that I might want to check out? All of those kinds of things can be part of your story without you hitting the easy button that basically, takes me to a piece of content that is nothing more than a marketing slick. That annoys me. Try to do less of that and more of showing me that you truly understand me, my business, my industry, my challenges, and are going to offer me some salient information that can help me do what I do more effectively. And there's a way to do that without it being a marketing slick.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Well, that is all the time we have for today. We're right at the top of the hour. I wanted to thank everyone for tuning in today, being so engaging, hitting us with your questions, and also obviously thank our amazing speakers, Peter and Shelley. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today to walk us through some of this data, and hopefully those who tuned in will walk away with some more tips and insights to bring back to their team. Be sure to join us for the next Live with Marketers on April 28th, where we're going to be featuring our 2022 Changing Marketing Jobs Landscape Report. So we'll be talking about more data that we found around the great reshuffle, why marketers are leaving their jobs, where they're going, how women are actually leading the great reshuffle, the future of remote work, et cetera, et cetera. So super exciting stuff that we've pulled from the insights from our own platform. So keep an eye on your email for a follow-up from this broadcast. We will include some key takeaways from the discussion, as well as a link out to the research that we partnered with Peter and his team on. That's it. Have a great day. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.